Tuesday, everybody. So as you know, Trump won big in Iowa, which means it's time for Democrats to freak out. Of course, it's always time for Dems to freak out, unless you bring up the border, the economy, crime, or Biden getting lost in his yard. Then there's nothing to see here, folks. But Trump really seems to bring out their inner Kathy Griffin. Hell, even Joy Reid bought a Donald Trump wig.
Oh,
it's true.
that was a soccer.
But the closer he gets to the White House, the closer they get to committing Harry-Carry with a pair of dull knitting needles. They see Trump and their brains seize up like Obama's appetite when he watches a dog show. He eats dogs. So what's really going on? What are they planning next? Well, it's to push the idea that Trump will stage a totalitarian takeover. And NBC helped plant this seed with this headline, quote, "Fears grow that Trump will use the military in dictatorial ways if he returns to the White House," end quote. Sounds pretty scary, right? But that's the setup. Here's more. Donald Trump is sparking fears among those who understand the inner workings of the Pentagon, that he would convert the nonpartisan U.S. military into the muscular arm of his political agenda as he makes comments about dictatorships and devalues the checks and balances that underpin the nation's 2-century-old democracy. By the way, sparking fears is code for let's scare you about things that haven't happened and only exist in our demented minds. And who are these mysterious experts? Well, like Raymond Ororo trying to make a rap album, no one wants to be on the record.
Damn.
NBC refers to them as, quote, "a loose-knit network of public interest groups and lawmakers who are quietly devising plans to try to foil any efforts to expand presidential power." Now, that sounds a lot more like a well-financed network of lefty know-it-alls who never recovered from Hillary getting spanked in 2016. And my apologies for that imagery. But you can see where this is going. It's another cabal, another soft coup. Their plan involves, quote, preparing to take legal action and send letters to Trump appointees, spelling out consequences they'd face if they undermine constitutional norms. This is crazy. It kind of sounds like that letter of 50 intel experts that spontaneously sprung up when Hunter's laptop dropped. Amazing how they had that ready, right? No collusion between the media, government, and Democrats there. See, the NBC article is designed to make you think past the sale, to assume Trump will indeed ask the military to do something very bad when he's elected. And so this story is to prep you for their aggression and not Trump's. Because the very same people putting this plan together are the same who will encourage militant resistance to Trump. And they want to make sure he can't respond if and when things turn violent. The problem, none of this is real. If Trump's plan is to use the military for his own gain, why didn't he do it the first time? You know, he had 4 years to do that, and he didn't even invade Canada, which is a gimme. So easy. So if Trump really wanted to become a dictator, then why isn't he one? He had the chance. Yet the Dems keep sparking fears like he's some new unknown threat out of nowhere. The man was in Home Alone 2, for Pete's sake. He didn't even send troops to break up Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And we know he should have. And if they're so worried about a president violating constitutional norms, why are they cheering while Joe Biden directs the use of lawfare against his probable opponent in 2024? Why? Because libs always accuse Republicans of the crap they do themselves. Weaponizing the IRS, done. Using the FBI to set up citizens, from parents at school board meetings to anybody within 5 miles of the Capitol on January 6th, done and done. So you think Trump will lead us into World War III? Then how do you ignore Biden flirting with it week to week? To them, Trump, who loved the military yet rarely used it, is the potential dictator. While Biden can't wait to bog our forces down in Ukraine, the Middle East, China, hell, the guy just ordered military strikes without congressional approval. All while his defense secretary can only be reached using his doctor's index finger. I don't know. Why aren't they saying a thing about Biden interfering in the investigation of Hunter, the presidential son who puts the penis in defying subpoenas? It works. It's in there. Somebody should tell Joe his first job is to protect the American people, not just his brother and idiot son. See, it's Biden who's ignoring the rule of law at the border. It's Biden who's unconstitutionally forgiving student loans, paying off young voters with our money. It's Biden who sees America as his kingdom. But okay, let's say Trump declares himself president for life and the military goes along. What would that even look like? Trump's first day as dictator might be this. 1, open windows, replace Biden old man smell with my own old man smell. 2, nuke enemies in Tehran and Harvard. 3, lunch, Trump steaks, extra ketchup. 4, charge Hillary Clinton with murder. Not so bad. Oh, I'm kidding. You are terrible people. So what you're seeing from the left is pure projection. And it's giving people a reason to vote for Trump because, once again, he's pissing off the right people. All these hacks suddenly care about the president violating the Constitution, but never with a Democrat in the Oval Office. And Biden has the 25th Amendment written all over him, along with do not resuscitate, which was added by Kamala Harris. The only time the press ever challenges the president is when he's a Republican. So if you vote for Biden, you're giving them 4 more years off. And come on, I just don't think Trump wants to be dictator. Who waits till he's 80 to become Hitler? Not even Hitler. Let's welcome tonight's guest. He calls himself a comedian, which proves he has a sense of humor. Actor, writer, and comedian Jamie Lissow. Little known fact, KT stands for Killer Tonsils. Former Deputy National Security Advisor KT McFarland. If you mess with her, she'll stab you with her elbows. New York Times bestselling author and Fox News contributor Cat Tip. And he's quick with a scowl, but wise as an owl. New York Times bestselling author, comedian, and former NWA World Champion. Jamie, when I read that article, I got the sense that they were setting the table up for a preemptive strike. It's like when someone gets ready, to put it in your world, somebody is preparing to divorce somebody else. Okay. They'll create like a prologue so it looks justified. You know, are they doing that with Trump, kind of setting the premise to take them out?
I think you're right. It's things that will probably not. It's like I like to watch this movie. Every night before I go to bed, I watch the same movie. I close my eyes and I watch everything you've ever done wrong in your whole life. And if like that's what they're doing, it's like this worst case scenario thing. Man, did you make a good point. He was already president and he didn't do any of these things. Mm-hmm. That's the whole point. I heard when Biden saw this, he was like, oh man, I could have asked him to do that stuff. Did you hear? There was a lot. I trust Trump way more than I ever trust Biden being president. I get worried about it. Did you hear when Biden first became president, he almost pardoned some people by mistake. They were like, Andrew Snowden, and he was like, pardon? I'm going to be honest with you, I can't stop thinking about Hillary getting spanked.
Yeah.
I just feel like if she had been into that, maybe Bill wouldn't have strayed outside the marriage.
Yeah, KT. Do you think I'm overstating this or understating this, that they're preparing for something?
You're understating it.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so
much.
here, and let me just, it's actually a really serious constitutional thing. So in 2016, working with the Hillary campaign, the FBI and the Justice Department decided they were going to make sure Hillary won. Well, that didn't work, right? The American people voted for President Trump. So then they weaponized the FBI, the Mueller investigation, all these various congressional investigations to try to sabotage Trump's presidency. Mm-hmm. So nobody was ever held responsible, right? The Russia hoax went on and on and on. Nobody was ever held accountable. Fast forward 2020, the CIA got on the act. And there was a sitting CIA official who coordinated with those 51 former intelligence officers to say the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. They knew it was not Russian disinformation. They lied. They kept their security clearances. All those people, were any of them ever held to account? No. So they've gotten away with it twice. They're going to try to get away with it the third time. I and a number of people who'd worked for President Trump have been trying to figure out where is it going to come next time, and they've just tipped their hat. Where is it going to come from? The military.
There you go. Very chilling stuff. Kat, you're a constitutional lawyer. I believe Jonathan Turley was one of your students.
Yeah, he always calls me for my opinion on that.
I know. You know, doesn't this sound, I guess it's not technically treason yet, but if they're pressuring the military to subvert the commander-in-chief and he wins, how is that not treason, Kat Timpf?
Okay. You're weird. I read this whole thing, and it makes a lot of assumptions, and I feel like I would like to see some polling on some of these things. For example, January 6th, they seem to be concerned about like a new and improved January 6th, because January 6th, it didn't work. And I've heard a lot of things said about January 6th. I mean, we talk about it all the time. Everybody's talking about it. One thing I've not heard a single person express is FOMO. I've not heard a single person be like, man, I wish I would have been there.
Yeah.
But I'll definitely be at the next one.
Right. Yeah.
Just poll Republicans, be like, do you regret not being at January 6th? Would you like to be at a future new and improved January 6th? Before you start going and saying that this is all going to be a possibility and it's going to be a takeover, is this actually a possibility? Is this something that's in people's hearts and minds? Because the article was like, according to people familiar with, which is so interesting because they're actually kind of doing a version of Trump's version of sourcing. It's not that far off from just doing the many people are saying. Yeah.
And you know, you're right. It's like, there's nobody who said, let's do Jan 6th again. Nobody
I haven't heard anyone say, I wish I would have gone.
I know.
I definitely won't miss it next time.
Yeah. And you know what the funny thing is? Trump is more popular since January 6th than before January 6th. How crazy is that?
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's a lot of people who just think all day about how much they want to be at the next one. Do the polling. Let me see.
More people want to go to the Lilith Fair.
What am I?
One woman got that reference. We know which side she's on. All right, Tyrus, is this Trump derangement or an actual plot?
No, this is a plot. But the Democratic Party, or the artist formerly known as the Democratic Party, the Socialist Party, they don't tip their hats. They spill it out on the table for us. They're like the kids who can only finish half the Lego, and they need President Trump to do the rest for them.
Yeah.
So the new move is, one, they're not going to debate.
Yeah.
Okay, and their argument doesn't work. And you can always look back in history, and you and I will send each other movies to watch, right? I watched Napoleon. We watched Napoleon, right? There was a scene where he advocated, right? They didn't like when he was emperor. He was horrible and cared about, the French people having food on their tables. The real jerk. He advocates. He leaves. They put him on an island. He comes back, and they meet him with the military. And he says to the military, I miss you guys. How are you? I'd like to be your king again. And they said, well, all right.
Yeah.
And that was it. What the Democrats are trying to do is, they're not going to let Napoleon come back and meet them. Before he gets there, they're going to have their people in place in the military saying, we are going to stop him before he gets to office. So what they're trying to do is, one, make voting irrelevant because they know better than us, but they're laying out that storyline, and we said it for jump. There will be no debates because President Biden's not going to debate with a convicted criminal. It's beneath the office of the presidency, so there's that. Kamala won't debate with whomever he's running with for those very same reasons. Anyone who supports Trump is a crazy.
Yeah.
That's the new talk. It's the crazies. And the crazies is not just regular John and Jane taxpayer anymore. It's anybody who works or affiliate with him as a part of the coup. Nobody wants Jan 6 too, because everyone who even thought about on Jan 5th is under the jail.
Yeah.
Like they all were arrested. But if you ask the other side about looting in Minnesota soon, that line is long. So we just need, they always lay it out to play it out for us. They're going to do this. And then if he does win the election, they'll just have the military in place to arrest him for treason, because we're seeing it. He didn't do anything with January 6th, wasn't convicted or anything, but yet they have courts taking him off the ballot based off of what? Feelings. Feelings versus facts, and feelings are just fancy lies people tell themselves to feel better.
All right, we got to move on, KT, unless you have something explosive to say. I'm going to go to the break.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.